Firstly, I'd just like to introduce, I'm sure I'm going to get the last name wrong, Amelia Dion Charest.
Very good pronunciation.
Fantastic. Also, we'll be talking with Adi Davis. And also, we've got fantastic Nadia Cavalier. I got that one right as well. So, firstly, thank you to the three ladies at the front. Really appreciate you being here. So, but first, I'd like to start with Amelia. Now, what I'd like to ask is sort of what information and advice can you pass to the audience regarding support a company can sort of enhance when addressing the health issues of females?
I'll come from the insurance perspective, right? So I'm a medical insurance advisor and broker. We advise companies, individuals, and families at Alea. And I think that one of the issues that we're witnessing today with corporations and companies of all sizes is that very rarely employees understand, especially women, how the benefits translate for their own health. So medical insurance benefits tend to be very generic, and it would be beneficial for employees, female employees, to truly understand how the inpatient, outpatient, and other benefits truly translate into a women's medical journey. And just to put some landscape around health insurance here in Hong Kong, it's not an obligation for employers to provide medical benefits to their staff, okay? It's not a legal obligation. However, we all know that it's the number one benefit that employees are interested in Hong Kong. And there's a wide diversity of benefits that are being provided to people here. And the main challenge is cost. It's extremely expensive for employers. Why? Because Hong Kong has the second most expensive private health system in the world after the United States. And that is reflected in premiums. And the other reason why, and maybe we can get to that a little bit later, but the other reason why employees are so interested in getting good coverage through their employer, it's because when we purchase insurance on an individual basis here in Hong Kong, there's discrimination against medical pre-existing condition. So there are some people that are not insurable, or their conditions for which they actually need to seek medical treatment is not covered, is excluded. So these are the challenges that we're seeing. I don't know if I've answered your question, David, but we can get into some more details about pre-existing and what we're seeing also with female health.
Certainly, and I think it was mentioned in the previous panel, like the physical challenges that females have through various stages of their life, and obviously this gets greater research as we go along, but the pipeline of research isn't sort of deep or long enough. What's happening also is the challenges with the shift in demographics of people trying to get pregnant later in life. And so is there sort of a light that you could shine on the assistance that comes with, you know, the pre and postnatal journey, and particularly the IVF journey?
That's really interesting. There's a high demand and high appetite for female employees to understand how well they're covered through their insurance at work in regards to IVF, prenatal, maternity, etc. However, they don't feel comfortable asking these questions when they're being hired or when they're having conversation with their management or their HR. And I think that's very legitimate. These are very, very sensitive and private matters. And we don't think we should put the onus on employees to have to seek information, you know, and go out there and, you know, feel uncomfortable asking questions. I think that it would be best if employers would actually be very forward with that information. So that would entail, for example, you do several member briefings about the insurance benefits each year to your staff, virtually, in person, hybrid, and you can cater them to certain segments of your staff population. For instance, having one for females around those questions. So it doesn't become the responsibility of the employee to ask questions, but it's the responsibility of the employer to provide that information and be forward with it. And I think that would be hugely helpful.
Yeah, I can't agree enough. Like, I'm a little bit fortunate, and sort of every day is a bit of a school day for me at Joint Dynamics, having surrounded by, you know, women's health specialists. And so for me it's quite good, but obviously personally training certain females in various stages of life, the one thing that now comes to be a bit of a more topical issue and something that's getting a little bit more education, a little bit more awareness is the trip through menopause, which we now know hasn't had enough research. Can you give us any information at all of the support that's available out there in the health field for menopause journeys?
Unfortunately, as we know, menopause has been such a taboo or undiscussed topic, right, for let's say centuries. And we're seeing that in Hong Kong, employees and employers are talking about it a lot more than they used to, and I think that's great. There's always room for improvement, right? And again, if an employer could be more proactive about sharing information about the medical insurance, how it translates into helping women going through menopause. So if we go down the traditional Western medical route, that's how a doctor specialist could prescribe hormonal treatment therapy to women and whether that's covered or not. In Hong Kong, most employee health insurance plans cover traditional Chinese medicine, right? Chinese medicine is very well known also to treat menopause. And then there are other things such as nutrition, even hypnotherapy that can be beneficial for women going through perimenopause and menopause. And again, I don't think it should be the responsibility of the female employees to seek all that information and to seek answers. If employers could be forward with it, it would be hugely, hugely helpful.
And that takes me to my next point, is just where do we go to find this information? Like ultimately people are here to trying to find out how they can improve their current situation and obviously suggest things to their current employers in their corporate ecosystem. Is there somewhere that a resource that you find is your go-to, A, as an insurer and B, as just like an information source?
Well, as the co-founder of Healthy Matters, the #1 health information platform in Hong Kong, available in English and traditional Chinese, obviously there's a lot of information online. Otherwise, I would just recommend employers to work with brokers and advisors that are specialists in medical insurance, that truly know what they're talking about and also can have a wellness offering. There are some in Hong Kong, including ourselves. And what we do on a regular basis for our clients, our company clients, is that we do member briefings, and we do them privately, and we can even agree on a segment of the employee population or on sending some key messages. So I think obviously credible sources online, as well as working with experts in Hong Kong that can truly cater to females' needs. And if I may, the insurance industry in Hong Kong remains quite male-dominated. So at Alea, we're an outlier. 80% of our workforce is female. So obviously, everyone is very well trained and informed on female health and how that translates with insurance.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's great knowledge. We're going to switch tack a little bit into another, particular area that I think is, underserved, and for me, it's a place where I don't have enough knowledge, and so I feel that there are people out there with, limited knowledge in how we can address the gaps that exist in assisting people in the health journey in the LGBTQ+ ecosystem. So I'd really love to hand to Adi. Adi, could you give us a bit of advice on how, not only the employer can navigate their environment, but also the employee can turn around and show greater responsibility, sensitivity in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that you mentioned how to translate. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is that if your people have to ask, if they have to go to HR and say, oh, does this apply to me, then actually you're not doing well enough. If they have to say, oh, well, I can't get married in Hong Kong, can I still take marriage leave? Does this apply to me? Then actually you're really not doing well enough in communicating what's available to your people. And likewise, things should be really anonymous, for the general population, but also for the LGBTQ population. We know that quite often people aren't comfortable coming out in the workplace for various reasons, and that's really, really valid. It can still really impact people's lives if you're outed. So that anonymous help where I can ask, is this available to me? How do I do this without having to come out to everybody in my office all at once, quite suddenly? And then, obviously the managers also have to be educated about what that means, and no, actually people can take off, for example, or they can work flexibly if they need to go to the UK to access fertility treatments because your marriage is not valid here, you can't access that here, and really making that very, very clear to your people. So that's for, what employers can start doing, and then also sort of starting to equalize leave as well. We've talked quite a bit about parental benefits and what that might mean. So for me, I really bang on the drum a lot about having equalized parental leave, both for the person who's carrying the child. Obviously, you need leave to recover from that. That is perhaps major surgery and body changes and hormones, and lots of things are really, make it really necessary to have leave. But actually, I think fathers are get the short end of the stick, and secondary carers get the short end of the stick on that. So I know a previous panel just talked about speaking up about what you need, and I often get men coming to me as a DEI professional asking, oh, what's in it for me? What can I do? There's nothing out for me. And well, you should be talking about secondary care leave. You should be talking about these other things because your partner may have just gone through something that is deeply traumatizing sometimes, that is really, really incredibly difficult on the body. It is someone that hopefully you love and you care about and you want to be there for. And as an HR professional, it is really helpful if you say to me, we want this. Why are we not asking, if that's something that you care about? I think that equality and leave is really, really helpful and growing that. And then in terms of what employees can do, you asked as well, I think that it's really, really important to be open with your employer as much as you feel comfortable to be, because that helps them say, oh, well, we need to be planning for this. As someone who's led teams, it's much easier for me to go to my one-up. If my team member says, hey, I'm gonna need this in a couple months, this is gonna be important to me. If I can go in earlier and advocate for you earlier and start laying the groundwork, then that's really, really helpful. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It goes a long way. Obviously, is there any one particular organisation, or is there any sort of a best practice guide that is out there in the current corporate environment that you say these guys are doing it particularly well? How can we use those guys as the flag bearers, or those people as the flag bearers, and potentially use that framework to say, can we please have something equitable to this sort of a policy? Do you see anyone out there that's doing it really, really well?
Yeah, there are organizations that are doing it well. I think that most organizations won't be able to share publicly what their benefits are, but in the DE&I space, if you ask, you tend to be able to get something. They'll say, oh, well, you might be able to do this, you might be able to do that, and that is really, really helpful in building a business case. I think organizations that take some of the gendered language, I've seen quite a few, and I can't name names, unfortunately, but I've seen quite a few organizations really moving towards, instead of saying, maternal leave for the female employee and the male employee husband, and like taking some of that gendered language out and taking some of the assumptions out of, it must be the male father of a heterosexual couple that will take 14 days exactly leave, which we know is not enough, after the birth of a child, and instead we're saying we don't know who's going to be the primary carer, we don't know who's going to be a secondary caregiver, and we don't know what your family structure is like. Removing that gendered language really, really helps all families, LGBT families in particular, who've got different needs.
Perfect, thank you. And this sort of advice segues. You mentioned obviously the middle management and the managers being really well educated, and probably folds into Nadia. And what I'd like to ask you is that you've had quite a unique journey from a health perspective, and you've had challenges along the way. You've been an elite athlete, you've been in good corporations and better corporations. Could you give us first a bit of a history as to how your journey's gone, the humps that you've sort of had to roll over, the challenges that you sort of managed to knock down, and sort of flesh out a little bit with regards to the education of that management and how much that is helpful or unhelpful?
Yeah, so as you said, I've been a competitive athlete for most of my life. I have also always wanted to be in the space of corporations, because for me, I wanted to learn how to manage a company without the stress of actually owning a company. So if I made a mistake, I didn't really have to worry too much. I always thought being fit and healthy, one of 4 girls, I wouldn't have any issues having a child. Sorry, getting a bit emotional.
It's all right, take your time.
I'm hormonal, guys. It's okay. Yeah, so I think being one of 4 girls, I always had in my mind that I wouldn't struggle having a child. Being athletic, being fit, you just assume all of these things. And when my husband and I started trying for a kid, I actually don't know why I'm being so emotional about this because I've been through it so many times. But essentially we found out we couldn't reproduce naturally, as they say, so we had to go through the IVF route. And it's a bit of a challenge, obviously, physically, emotionally, everything, because when you're trying to navigate going up the corporate ladder as well as trying to have a child, it's a lot. And trying to have a child in itself is a lot. You add in all the extra crap that you get thrown where if you're trying and you're married, obviously everyone's situation is different, but there's a big sort of culture in Hong Kong that as soon as you're married, you're expected to have a child. And you are always asked, oh, when are you pregnant? When are you pregnant? Oh, are you there yet? And if you've had a bit of a big meal and they're like, oh my God, are you pregnant? And you're like, no, I've just had a massive pho.
Oh my God.
You know, and you're like, oh, geez, that's just a big Vietnamese meal. And we essentially went through this process, and we went through the whole, issue, and we were like, okay, can we go through the public route? Because obviously IVF is incredibly expensive. For us, it just didn't work out that way, so we had to go the private route. Our journey led us from doing the private route in Hong Kong to then doing it in the US. And that in itself is a huge challenge, because if you're doing it in Hong Kong, you can kind of get around it by, taking doctor's leave and things like that, although it's incredibly stressful. But when you have to dedicate going overseas for this, you have to really give yourselves essentially 4 weeks, if not more, to travel, go through the full cycle, recover, then come back to wherever, for me, Hong Kong. And for me to try and navigate that, especially when I went through it the first time round, my manager at the time wasn't a parent. I didn't want to delve into the fact that we were attempting to have a child, especially when you're in a workplace. You're not going to be openly talking about attempting to have a child because A, you don't know how long it's going to take, B, being a female manager, you already are thinking, oh God, they're going to be, am I going to get that pay rise? Am I going to get that bonus because I'm trying to have a kid? If I'm going to fall pregnant within a certain period, am I going to get the maximum bonus even though I've busted ass to, do everything that I can to deserve this? Because it is, if being a parent or bearing a child physically is something that you want, that those are all things that you have to think about, particularly being a woman, because if you are the carrier, then that's something that you have to really kind of put yourself through. And it is honestly like running a marathon, if not more. And I hate running. So that was already a big step up. But in terms of going from that and having that flexibility, this was in and around time of COVID. So I was lucky to be able to kind of finesse going away and working from abroad and kind of managing it that way. So working, basically a 12-hour time difference to manage calls and things like that, whilst basically going through the entire IVF process, which was hectic, but you do what you have to do. And I think the background of being a competitive athlete, I was never professional, by the way, so
Sorry,
take that back.
Apologies.
I think being a competitive athlete and always having that mindset, you just get on with it. Like, you just have to knuckle down and just not focus on anything else except for that one goal. I don't know, sorry.
That's great. Thank you for obviously being so vulnerable, being really honest with us. That's really pretty special to have someone share such a journey. And how do you think that this affects the LGBTQ community when it comes to turning around and trying to bear children?
Oh, massively. So we discussed on our pre-call. Obviously, straight couples will find out whether or not they need to go through the IVF journey or whether they can do something else. But if I were to find a partner and wanted to have a child, we would either have to adopt abroad, which is hard. We wouldn't be able to jointly adopt in Hong Kong. It's not illegal, but it is not done. Or we'd have to go abroad for IVF treatments, and depending on where that imagine partner potentially was from. Could you go through the NHS route if they're from the UK? Are they from Hong Kong? Are they what? Like, there are lots and lots of questions about that. And then, so you've got, the expense of having a child, what you've got to talk about in the workplace where, okay, yeah, it's not COVID anymore. They'll probably figure it out, right? And then not only that, but then after, you have that child, you have to deal with adoption potentially in Hong Kong. You've got to deal with what schools are practical as two moms or two dads, or if you've had a surrogate or whatever. It is hugely, hugely complicated for the LGBT community, and sperm, and oh God, I could go on and on. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's just touching back, Emily. What sort of advancements are there now in insurance support for all populations when it comes to IVF? Are they becoming increasingly difficult to find support for financially from the insurance community?
The private IVF route in Hong Kong is extremely expensive, right? I think that one cycle is between 150,000 to 250,000, so it's a lot of money. Traditionally, IVF was not covered by medical insurance. Never, 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 never. However, we are seeing some very progressive employers in Hong Kong. A law firm I have in mind, unfortunately I can't mention the name, but not only do they cover IVF, they also cover egg freezing for their female staff. So there are some employees out there that are really, really going the extra mile and providing these kind of benefits. The alternative, obviously, is for you to purchase a health insurance that covers IVF. It's rarely covered in Hong Kong with local onshore compliant products. However, from Hong Kong, you can purchase offshore plans from other jurisdictions in the world that cover IVF. But you have to keep in mind that there's a waiting period, usually between 12 to 24 months, before you can actually claim for the benefit. In addition to the fact that the benefit is capped, and it's usually about 30,000 HKD per cycle that you're reimbursed. So as you can see, between 30 and 150, you still have to pay a lot out of pocket.
Still better than zero.
Better than zero, agreed.
Thank you for that. Now, listen, I'm cognizant of time that we need to really keep pushing on with some other topics that we'd quickly like to cover, so please stay with us. Obviously, there's multiple different health journeys that exist for females, and as mentioned by Steph in the previous panel, certain things like the mental health field is, the female gender is much more susceptible. Of the three people that end up with early onset Alzheimer's, two of them are female. Major depressive disorders heavily skewed in the female gender, and so with regards to how the corporate community can deal with the mental health aspect, that is sort of the stigmatism is slowly breaking down. Can I ask you first, do you see that support, is it adequate, or what's a better strategy for corporates to deal with someone who's going through those mental health challenges?
Is it adequate? Of course not. I always say, I live in reality. I try to work towards an ideal, right? I think that when we're looking at women's mental health, quite often what I hear people are asking for is they want to be able to talk about it. They want that clarity and what's available. How do I access this? What time off is available? Can I, do I have to give a doctor's leave certificate when I go see my psychologist? And is it going to impact, if my boss knows that I have clinical depression, is that going to impact the way that they view me because of stigma? And so what privacy is available? So I think that that clarity and what's available, and also that tone from the top is really, really important. When you have your most senior people in your office saying, this is something that I really care about, this is something, we will not accept bad behavior on this isn't who we are, that is massively, massively important. When you're saying, I care about this is who we are as a firm, very important, and that also needs to be echoed by that middle management well before there's any problem. If you wait until there's an issue to address something, to get coverage, then you're way too late in covering it.
Excellent. Nadia, can I get your opinion on this as well, please?
I think having had experience in both a small company and a very large company now, I think a big thing, and I echo you a little bit, Edie, is about, I think, just transparency, but also being very much aware of privacy. Like, we are in every right, if we are going through whatever we're going through, whether it's IVF, mental health, it doesn't matter. You should not be asking the questions when it comes to medical. And I think the US do a really good have a really good kind of standard of you literally cannot ask because you will get sued type thing. So I don't quote me on that, but I know that they're don't quote me. But they are really, really, really strong on not asking any questions when it has to do with medical, full stop. And I think I've experienced it on both sides where I was questioned when I was going through IVF the first time and I didn't want to share the information about what I was doing, but that I needed to take leave, you know, and I would make it work. And, you know, it was being pried, you know, and it was very uncomfortable, particularly as my boss at the time was male. And, you know, you're just kind of like, okay, like, I'm not going to continue like giving you answers, but I just need you to say yes or no and we'll make it work. Second time round, you know, being in a bigger corporation, I actually felt like there was a lot more, okay, yep, no questions asked, like, just let me know if you're okay, if you need to take time off, blah, blah, blah. And I think in bigger corporations as well, depending on where you are, since COVID, either they have fully adopted a sort of flexi working hours, which has been really great, particularly as a newer parent or, you know, just in general, you know, work-life balance, regardless of being a parent or not. But also then, you know, if you've got policies in place which allow you to work from abroad, for example, in a certain number of days, then you're able to utilize those things to make it the most for whatever you need to. Again, it could be for being a parent or just in general, you want to have a longer holiday and you don't have to take bloody 20 days of your leave, you know? So I think that privacy is really important. And I think in Hong Kong, it's a standard to just know everything. And I think that really needs to shift, that really traditional mindset of, oh, you need to know every single detail about someone's life. You don't. And you have there's no reason why you should ever think that you have that right to know that. If they want to divulge it, great. If they do, leave them alone.
Fantastic. Thank you for that insight. Now, Emily, you're finding corporations trying to insure themselves better for the absentee issue that goes along with people taking extended leave and effectively needing that mental health leave, or those big pockets of leave that come with paternity and maternity leave. Is it something that corporations can, I'm not sure, somehow pay a larger premium so that the cost of the underlying business isn't as great, or is it just more standard in policies these days? What's the movement on mental health for insurance companies supporting corporates to support employees?
We've done a lot of progress in Hong Kong. A decade ago, no one would ever speak about mental health. Employers wouldn't talk about it, employees wouldn't talk about it, and now it's the number one question that our clients are asking about. Because employees are advocating in favor of getting mental health support because they know it's a big concern. So there are four things that we've seen in terms of, if we think creatively of how employers can provide mental health support to their staff. One, the employee assistance programs. They're inexpensive, and this used to be a traditional add-on to medical benefits, mostly provided in large corporations. And basically, it's a hotline where you call someone when you're really unwell, burnt out, other things, suicidal thoughts, etc. These programs were inexpensive for employers and underutilized and never actually talked about in corporations in Hong Kong. But now employers are asking all the details about the employee assistance programs, briefing their staff, and also increasing the level of coverage there. Second aspect is that we're seeing is that employers are now trying to see whether they can afford covering psychological consultations or counseling or psychotherapy, right? So psychiatry used to be traditionally covered, although capped. And as you know, psychiatry is a medical profession, and this is a medical specialist that can prescribe drugs for your needs. Psychology and counselors give you, they can help you through therapy. They cannot prescribe medicine. However, they can do a long-term therapy with you if needed. And so employers are looking into adding these benefits. It's not cheap, to be frank, and this for two reasons. Private sector in Hong Kong is expensive, and a consultation with a psychologist in Central today varies between 1,500 to 2,500 for an hour. So that's extremely expensive, right? So that's the second thing employers are looking into. And then third, we've seen in Asia some companies that have developed some really, really cool apps for employees. And on these apps, you have a lot of tools for your mental well-being, your mindfulness, but most importantly, you have access to a network of psychologists and counselors, and you can have video consultations. And that is all provided for free through the app and through your employer that's paying for it. Now, it's not as good as in person, but it's a start. And it's usually half the price for the employer, okay? That app, when being provided to all staff, it's half the cost than actually upgrading your mental health benefits. So that's something that is that we're seeing being picked up here in Hong Kong. And then lastly, obviously, it's just being creative, providing mental health talks or workshops within the company. And lastly, we spoke about flexibility, and I think that's really, really key. Although it's not tied to insurance per se, but we tell our clients, no matter how good your medical benefits, if your staff don't have the flexibility to go see a doctor, what's the point, right? And so one thing that would be great in Hong Kong is if the employer is providing an annual checkup, right, preventative care, and we know how much preventative care is important, especially for women, well, they should say, we give you half a day to do your preventative care, right? Because you need to fast before you do your checkup, and we give you that flexibility. And we know that women, when they're a parent, they are the one within the household that manages everyone's health, husband, grandparents, kids, etc. They also need that flexibility during the week. That's really, really important. So as an employer, if you're providing good medical benefits and insurance, that's great. Yes, yay, but you also need to provide the flexibility that goes with it.
I think just to summarize that, a lot of what we're talking about comes down to you should be treating your employees like adults and assuming that they will act like them, right? So, giving that flexibility, yeah, I assume that you're an adult, and if we're having performance management issues, we will manage the performance management. Rather than saying, oh, you can have 1 hour if you do an hour later. Like, come on, we're adults. I get my work done, and I should be able to go to the doctor when it's open, right? If you're a leader, if you're managing people, saying, you don't have to tell me that. I do not care if you're going to the doctor. If you get your work done, great. If someone's trying to bother you while you're at the doctor, let me know, and I'll speak to them. Like, it's treating each other like adults in the workplace because we are all adults. I'm sorry.
Excellent. Yeah, obviously fantastic points. And I think that what it circles back to a lot of the time is like the education of that middle manager that deals with the person. Like you're spending much more time with your middle management, your direct line manager, than you are with your kids and your family most of the time. So, they've got a pretty large part to do with how your mental health is, how your health is, and so if they can give you the time. Now, I understand we're under real-time pressure, and so what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about some other things just quickly that we spoke of yesterday, and the one thing that the panel were fantastic with me yesterday is understanding that you need to shift the narrative from, the female employee is the expensive employee. It's the fact that children are the expensive people. It's not the female employee that then is the person that you're reluctant to employ because you're having to pay for maternity care and these sorts of things. So normalising the leave associated with men going away and being a much greater role within the family is vitally important. And so, just that message that, females aren't expensive, children are expensive is one thing that I'd really sort of like to, reiterate that the panel were fantastic with me yesterday. The other one is having clearly defined strategies for various different stages of the career progress is really important. And we mentioned yesterday that there's different strategies you might want to have, and it might be that you find leaders early on in the career journey, and having female mentors find those leaders and incubate them and make sure that they are ready for the journey on return to work should they have a family or should they need time off to look after the child. And so there's an incubation phase that could be a strategy that's also, should be implemented, or if you've got that education, as they mentioned, in your middle management, it's something that I think is incredibly important to sort of foster as a concept. And so I'll speak very little now, but I'd like to give everyone a chance to basically give us a takeaway of what they feel is, what the vitally important message you'd like to drive home.
I'd love for employers to really invest in their medical benefits, right, and provide robust health insurance to their staff. The reality is that not all employers and enterprises have the money to do that, but there are creative ways around it. So if you cannot afford high-end medical insurance, you could allocate a budget to your staff and they could utilize it towards their medical care or their own choosing of a medical plan. And tied with that, there must be flexibility. Medical clinics in Hong Kong are closed on Sundays and Saturday afternoons. Mothers, females need to see a doctor during the week. And so if you're offering benefits, you need to offer flexibility that goes with it.
Yeah, you can. So, HR professional, I think that from my perspective, and I'm the only person responsible in a formal capacity for doing DE&I in Asia, and I only have so many hours in the day. If there is something in the workplace that you care about, me hearing about it is so helpful to go to my boss and say, hey, this is what our folks are saying, we need to work on this. And then I can say, oh, wouldn't you know, if you build a business case, then we can probably do that. Like, I can help you as an HR person only if I know that these are things that we want, because I don't want to spin my wheels and I only have so many hours in the day if this isn't something that people want. So please talk to your HR people, get involved with your networks, and get involved with networks outside of your organization to get some ideas about what might be done outside. And the second thing that I think is really important, especially if you're just starting out on some of these journeys, is not letting perfect be the enemy of good. I see so many people get so frustrated because they can't get this thing that they really want, even though they've been offered this thing that's not quite as good. And sometimes saying, okay, we'll take this and we'll keep working on the other piece, and just allowing that okay bit can actually be really helpful, and you're still making progress even if you don't have perfect yet, and we can work towards an ideal while we live within reality.
I would say from my side is to be willing to push back. You don't have to give any information that you don't need to. And I think that comes with experience, but be willing to push back. Be willing to stand up for yourself and just say, you know what, no, I don't need to give you that information. And I think also, if you have a really strong support network, whether that's, people going through the same issues or, just friends who are willing to listen and be empathetic as to the situation you're in, lean on those people, because you don't realize when you're in a really terrible situation a lot of the time. So I think be willing to say no and step back from the situation, but also lean on the people around you, because they're the ones who know you the best, and they will clock on when you are struggling, when you don't realize you're struggling yourself.
Excellent. I'm just dovetailing off the back of that commentary, and it'd be remiss of me to not mention it on behalf of Catherine, who was supposed to be chairing today, is that Catherine's our joint dynamic psychologist. The one thing that is really important is that you've got great friends, you've got great support networks, but also you're generally not qualified to give advice. And so when your great amounts of meaning and really compassionate advice and all this sort of stuff is one thing, but just understand that if that person does feel that vulnerability, or that person does have that challenge that you feel you might be giving them the advice, it's far more dangerous to give a little bit of okay advice than it is to just say, listen, go and see someone that really is qualified to help you through various journeys. That's from a physical health or a mental health journey. And so, defer to the professional all the time, because most of the time that's going to be, comfortably the safest option for the person that you're trying to help, and they'll get the best result. But I'd really like to thank all of my panelists. Big round of applause for my panelists, please. Obviously, they've got a wealth of knowledge that you should tap into, privately. If you can reach out to them, we'll give the details in regards to how to contact them if you've got specific questions as to their stories, journeys, and advice. I'd like to thank obviously the sponsors as well, and everyone that supported today. So, excellent. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Cheers.